first shock came in 2016, when the British suddenly voted in favour of Brexit and the Americans elected Donald Trump. Since, one shock for modern liberal democracies has followed another, whether in Italy, Argentina, the Netherlands, or France. And the next quakes could follow.
There are huge challenges.
I do think that the situation is very dramatic.
And I think the question of how we stabilise liberalism is a really serious one.
Is this a trend that cannot be stopped? And if so, how? To find out, some of the world's leading researchers and practitioners met in spring 2024 for a unique event, the Berlin Summit, in a historic setting on the outskirts of the German capital.
We have to listen to what the people are concerned about, start with the people.
What we need to do is actually listen to what people think is wrong with the world.
If you look at populist support from the outside, it seems that there is a strong irrational moment in that. But we have to accept that people make deliberate choices, that people are dissatisfied.
Winning back the people. How can people who have lost, or are in danger of losing, their trust in liberal democracies be won back? Searching for causes.
The middle classes have been hit by a series of economic shocks in the last 2 or 3 decades. The effects of globalization, the effects of technological change and automation, the effects of austerity, especially in Europe.
There's regions that really thrive and prosper, and there's regions that really struggle to cope with structural change. And these very often become strongholds of populist parties.
People don't trust the status quo policies any longer, but they're not being given a clear agenda on what can replace it.
There are many reasons brought forward for resentment, including crime, immigration. But there is almost always one common factor. Populists are systematically more successful in regions where there have been major economic disruptions, and where the feeling of a loss of control is rampant, even more so since the pandemic and the inflation shock.
One policy option to address this development, most obviously then, is to support the development of such lagging regions.
It's about getting back control. The recommendation is now shared by many, like so many of the new economic policy recipes put forward. After more than 2 days of debates, the summit participants presented a declaration outlining what should serve as the new guiding principle.
Industrial policies, particularly industrial policies targeting good jobs, can help repair some of those fissures in the social fabric, especially with regard to rebuilding the middle class. That will require us rethinking how we're doing industrial policy in the future.
We need a new deal between government and business and between capital and labor, but also with citizens at the core.
Adding to this, the experts concluded that we need a better managed, a better controlled globalization with less losers. The signatories also agree that something urgently needs to be done about the gap between rich and poor, by strengthening the poorly paid, more appropriately tax high wealth, or a startup capital for all. There is also consensus on a need to design climate policies that engage people rather than coercing them.
It's about how to make the green transition something that addresses the everyday needs and desires of the general and broader public.
Targeted financial support that will be needed to make clean heating, clean mobility, clean living solutions affordable and accessible.
There is absolutely some wisdom to be found in the role of markets and getting prices to reflect the damages, but that is not the prime driver of the changes needed. It's an important element of a much more diverse toolkit of things that governments need to do to stimulate innovation, stimulate industrial investment, enhance employment in the emerging clean sectors.
No matter where, it is always about a new balance between market and state, a more effective one, after many years in which the markets were praised as the cure for almost everything.
And for the European Union, we have seen that European policy programs that do exactly that support lagging regions in their economic developments, that such policies help to decrease populist support.
People need to have opportunities to get politically involved. Of course, there are elections, but we need to move ahead with participatory democracy.
If we want to save liberal democracy, we should focus on the young and make the situation for the young much better.
Europe is lagged behind the United States in terms of coming up with the policy responses.
A manifesto, first signed by leading minds like Danny Roderick, Mariana Mazzucato, Branko Milanovic, and Adam Tooze. In the meantime, several dozen have signed, including Nobel laureate Angus Deaton, as well as former IMF chief economist Olivier Blanchard and former Clinton advisor Laura Tyson, plus German economists like Jens Söderholm and Isabella Weber.
The Berlin Declaration is incredibly important. It's a commitment to designing this New Deal.
We have now a document which is called the Berlin Declaration. Looks a little bit similar to the Washington Consensus. In other words, we have a document that lays out principles of change in economic policies.
The crucial thing is not to aim for everyone, but to think about how we build a coalition, how we build a majority.
The objective is to provoke the discussion. If it provokes the discussion and political parties have to take a stance, then some parties might actually like it and use even maybe, if not the entire agenda, but at least some of it.
It's time for new economic thinking.
There's a huge potential, and I see that more and more people get engaged. However, governments really don't want to move that much. So I think the challenge really is to bring in fresh ideas.
There is great potential, and there is much to win. If better policies are not implemented soon, a phase of instability and conflict will follow. Time for an agenda for the people to win back the people.